This presentation is brought to you by the SDG Decision Education Center.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Negotiation Closing the Quality Gap. My name is Eric Bickel, and I'm a professor at the University of Texas and the academic director of the Texas Executive Education Strategic Decision and Risk Management Certificate Program. Today's session is presented by the SDG Decision Education Center in collaboration with Texas Executive Education. Texas Executive Education is SDG's academic partner for the SDRM certificate program. This program combines UT's academic depth with SDG's 35 years of experience in decision consulting and custom course development. Today's webinar is focused on negotiation and multi-party decision making, and we find it helpful to distinguish between decisions involving a single decision maker, which I have on the left, and those involving multiple parties, which we have on the right. In the case of a single decision maker, we could be talking about a single individual or an organization. What's really important is that there's a common objective or goal. In the case of multi-party decisions, we're dealing with more than one decision maker, each of whom may have different objectives. Today's webinar and the associated SDRM course are focused on the right-hand side, multi-party decisions. I have the pleasure today of introducing our speaker, Gaylen Paulson. Gaylen is Associate Dean and Director of the Texas Executive Education Program. Gaylen's research and application focuses on interpersonal environments that affect organizational decision quality, and this includes negotiation and conflict resolution. Gaylen, it's a pleasure to host you today. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Eric. It's a great pleasure to be with all of you today, and I look forward to kind of running you through some ideas that are related to how we can work more effectively with people, especially in difficult situations where what you want and what I want don't mesh very well. And so as we look at negotiation today, I thought I would start with a quick little poll and just to kind of ask you what comes to mind for you when you see or hear the word negotiate. And we're going to give you a couple of options here to think about. For some of you, I'm guessing that you say, I love negotiating. Bring me with you. Let's go. Other folks at the other extreme, I just hate this. Why don't people just tell me what they want and we can be done? And then for other folks, people kind of think of it as a dance. Why do we got to do this stupid dance? Other people say, you know what, I'm going into this. I'm hopeful that they're going to be a reasonable party. And other people just say, well, I just hope I get a good deal today. For you, what's the primary driver? And maybe one of those stands out for you. Maybe a couple stand out. But if you had to choose one, what would be one of the primary mentalities that you would bring to this environment? So if you want to select those now. And let's have a look. So about a quarter of us say, you know what, I just love this stuff. This is great. Those people oftentimes are looking for another little edge, one more thing that they can put in their toolkit that can help them to move more effectively in the future. Other folks just say, I hate this. Hopefully we're going to give you some tools to think about today and maybe make you more comfortable in this environment. Some people feel like it's a ritual, about a quarter of you, and there are some certain elements of this that are fairly scripted and standardized. We'll talk about some of that. Some folks just say, I want people to be reasonable. And sometimes we don't realize how our behaviors are impacting their approach to negotiation, and we'll look at that a bit. And a lot of times we're just trying to reach a good deal, but the question for us is, what does that even look like? So we're going to kind of dig into that just a bit today. But before we do that, why don't we jump back to our slides? We're going to take a look at what negotiation really means and what it represents for us as we try to approach these situations. We'll look at a basic definition of negotiation as being a process by which people are interacting in order to try and reach some sort of a settlement and agreement that helps to drive them forward, satisfying their conflicting goals. Now, the interesting thing with this is that if you like Latin, if you look at the Latin for this, two words, nec and odium, are our roots for negotiate. Nec meaning not, and odium meaning easy or leisurely. So you are by definition in an environment that is not easy. And we find ourselves in these environments all the time, that you're going to see acquisitions and procurement kind of opportunities where you're looking to buy or to sell. You have business development kinds of environments. Anytime you're working with people in a management environment where you're trying to make some internal decisions, huge opportunities. Also, though, sometimes it's not about us taking advantage of new opportunities. Sometimes promises have been broken or expectations haven't been met, and so we have a conflict or a dispute, and we have to figure out how we're going to move forward together. Ultimately, this is we call it ubiquitous, that you do this all day long. If you've got little kids, you know that negotiating starts early in the morning and doesn't end until late at night. It doesn't have to be a formal context. It may be something very informal. In fact, I'd advocate for never using the word negotiate because it puts people on the defensive. It makes them really worried, and it puts them into a competitive posture. Whereas if we said, hey, let's just kind of explore together, let's play with some ideas, a totally different mentality might emerge. But going back to that idea of a good deal, how do we reach a good deal? A good deal means different things, and there's a lot of different elements as we look at this. That there is a driver of economic success where you say, okay, how did I do relative to the value that I was trying to capture? Did I actually take a rational approach? Did I get a rational outcome? Did I take the best path that yielded me the most gain? We also, there are concerned with relationships. Can I work with this person again in the future? Most of our negotiations are not one-offs, that we're going to see these people repeatedly, and so we have to be sensitive to the fact that I need to work with these people going forward. They also might talk to people. So what's my image going to be? Is my reputation going to suffer? Are they going to tell a bunch of folks that I'm a jerk and that I'm not reasonable to work with and cause me grief in the future? We look for stability. To what extent will our deals hold up? Have I missed something? Are there going to be aspects of this that are going to fall apart in the future? Am I going to actually have to come in here and make repairs later on that I wish I hadn't missed on the first pass? And finally, there's this notion of efficiency, that we want to come in and make sure that we are capturing all of the opportunities that are there. Did I miss out on certain things? Could I have done something differently that would have made the deal better for everyone? Ultimately, we're trying to maximize on these different areas, recognizing that you can't just emphasize one over the other, or to say, oh, it's okay now. We didn't do that well economically, but we've got a really good relationship. This is kind of the salesperson's best friend. Oh, we're going to capture it back in the future. We're going to sell millions of units. Yeah, we're losing money on each unit, but we're going to sell so many. And we've got this good relationship going forward. So we need to be sensitive to these things and not just trade one off for the other, thinking that we're going to get a better outcome. So we're going to focus today on rationality. And the interesting thing with rationality is that as we try to make rational choices, when I'm by myself and I'm trying to make a rational choice, I believe that I'm a pretty rational person, right? And if I've got straightforward choices, I'm just going to take the best path for me. But that's not always the case. In the context that we're talking about today, we're going to be looking at a situation where I'm not independent, that it's not just up to me. The choices that I make are oftentimes going to be driven by the choices of the people that I'm working with. That if we think of this in terms of a football team just coming off the Super Bowl, we're trying to be strategic, and I get everybody internally on board as to what our plays are going to be and how we're going to try and run those plays. But I've also got to be sensitive to the other team and how they're going to be trying to respond strategically to me. That this is not an environment where you're making a choice that's independent of others. And in those contexts, suddenly our communication skills matter a ton. And your ability to negotiate and to work effectively in a collaborative environment matters a lot. So we're going to do a couple little things this morning. I'm going to give you a little exercise that is a little exercise in rational choice amidst others. So here's what we're going to look at. We are going to play what we call the guess the number game. Your job is to guess a whole number between 0 and 100. And your goal here is to submit a guess that is going to be closest to 2/3 of the average of everyone's guesses. Okay? So we've got a lot of folks here today on the webinar, and your job is to try to figure out what everyone's guess is going to look like and then to submit 2/3 of that. So were we to have 3 people here today, okay, and they were to submit a guess of 30, 61, and 80. If those were our 3 guesses, we'll be calculating the average. The average here would be 57. The person who guessed 61 would not be the winner. We're looking for 2/3 of that, right? 2/3 of that average is 38. So our winning guesser would actually be the person who guessed 30. Okay? So I want you to ponder this for a second. And we're going to be having you, why don't you go ahead and write down a number. Do that now. Just, get yourself locked in on a number. We've got a little bit of a limited polling system. And so what we're going to look at here is for you to submit a radio button answer that corresponds, there we go, to the guess that you made. So you need to decide whether you submitted a guess between 0 and 20, 21 to 40, and so on. This will work mathematically as we tally everything up. But submit your answer now based upon these 5 options. Okay. So here's what we're seeing. We've got about 20% of us in the 0 to 20 range, 34% 21 to 40, 41 to 60, 37%, 8% 61 to 80, 4% above 80. We're running the math as we speak. So, based upon these submissions, our average across the group is about 39. But here again, we're not after the 39. We're after 2/3 of that, which actually comes in at 26. 34% of you are in that 21 to 40 kind of range. And so, ultimately, what we're having to do in this little exercise is to say, what is everybody else going to be guessing, and how do I adapt my guess accordingly? Let me show you a few different slides, and I'll make some applications as to how this functions. So, within our, let's go back to our deck. Within this process, I mean, this went very, very fast, right? And so as you're trying to anticipate what's going on here, level 1 thinking just says, you know what? I have no clue what I ought to do here. If this is just random, I might as well go with the middle. I'm just going to say 50. All right, 0 to 100, that's great. But then you might say, well, okay, hold on. I'm going to maybe outsmart these people. My goal is to guess 2/3 of that, right? So if they're all going to guess 50, I'm going to get out ahead of them and guess 33. Aren't I doing well? But then I start thinking, hold on. If everybody else is thinking that they're pretty smart and getting to 33, I'm going to get one step ahead and I'm going to 22. Oh, wait a second, this is getting tougher. If everybody's thinking 33 and then guess 22, I better go to, oh man. And so our brain starts to run. Now, some of you got, level 1, some of you went to level 2, level 3. If you're a math guru, you could say, okay, well, I can see how this works. You keep multiplying times 2/3, and then as we get to the rounding rule, you could get down to 0 or 1. Some of you might have gotten there, but here's the trick. You are not at the math conference today. That your task is to come in and say, what's everybody else thinking? What are they doing? And how am I going to get out ahead of that, but maybe not too far out ahead? Now, I'm trying to make some choices here. What is this application? How does this fit in the real world? So let me show you an interesting little example of this. John Maynard Keynes, pretty famous economist, right? John Maynard Keynes talked about professional investments, and he compared it to newspaper competitions where, these are some old competitions where people had to pick out the 6 prettiest faces from 100 photos. But the goal was not to pick the 6 that you thought were the prettiest, but instead to pick the 6 that you thought everyone else would see as the prettiest. Okay? And what he said was, this is what professional investment is like, that what you're doing when you try and choose a company is not to pick the best company, not to pick the ones with the best financials, to pick the one that's got the best situation, but to pick the one that everybody else is going to be investing in, that everybody else is going to think is the best. And then it's even going further than that, is to say, well, what does the market thinks is the best company? And maybe you start to go even deeper than that. It causes you to rethink how you need to approach some business decision making as we're in this competitive environment. Let's go back to our little our guess and number game. I'll show you a couple of interesting little examples. The Financial Times had a contest, same exact thing that we just did here. They offered up 2 business class tickets, London to New York. 1,400 people submitted a guess. Their average came in at 18.9. They had a lot more time to think about it than you all did. 2/3 of that came in at 12.6. 31 people had submitted the winning guess at 13. But here's my favorite. Check out this guy. Little kid submitted a winning guess. And they said, how did you figure it out? And he said, I just asked my dad what number he was going to guess, and I submitted 2/3 of that. And there's a smart kid. Right? He's saying, what's an average Financial Times reader likely to submit? That's my task, right? And to get out ahead of that, same thing in a negotiating context. What we're trying to do is we're trying to say, what kinds of moves are they going to be making? How do I adapt the moves that I'm making to the moves that they're going to be making? And to try and get out ahead. Now, this is made more complex by the fact that negotiation is not just about claiming. That we're definitely trying to make some moves that are going to pull resources our direction. This is what most people associate with negotiating. But at the same time, we've got to balance this out, and we've got to also factor in the opportunity to be creative. That you're negotiating with people who are your partners, folks who are going to be your suppliers, your customers, people internally to your organization. These are folks that I need to do well. And so we need to be creative as we come across some of these conflicts to say, all right, how can I craft the best solution and be creative with this, even as I'm sensitive to that element of claiming. I try to balance these out, and that's what makes this not easy, because the things that help me to actually claim get in the way of the creating, and the things that help me to be creative sometimes will block our ability to pull resources our own direction. We've got to try and use skills in both of these areas. It's never easy. Okay? Let me give you an example here. What happens as I try to get creative even when things are competitive? I'm going to show you a little tool called Adjusted Winner. This is how we actually help people to register for MBA courses here at the university. The interesting thing is that sometimes you might remember how you used to register, where like it was based upon your last name, and you know, one quarter you got it one way, one semester, and then it was like, okay, next time I'm going to be last, this time first, and kind of varies around. In MBA programs, you don't have that many semesters, and you really only have a couple of semesters where it's your opportunity to register for electives, and sometimes the class is only offered in one semester or the other. And so how do we make it kind of fair for people, as opposed to just doing the alphabet or how fast you're able to you know, log in and register as soon as it was opened up? There's a process that we call Adjusted Winner. What we can do is we can actually give people a certain number of points and allow them to bid on their courses. And if you got into a course, it was because you outbid somebody else, but it also meant that you had less in your budget than for the remaining courses that you were also bidding on. So let me show you how this works in the context of a divorce. I'm not giving you these as tools to help you get in a divorce now and to encourage you to do that. But we also know that people in a divorce are, by definition, probably not getting along very well, and they're very apt to destroy a lot of assets. So we're going to try and divide up some assets today in a divorce. We're going to have 6 things that we're going to be trying to allocate between him and her. We've got a house, an SUV, a Corvette, a boat, a cabin, and some investments with maybe varying but similar degrees of equity in those different assets, let's just assume. So we've got 100 points to allocate. And what we do is we say, okay, husband, you go off one direction. Wife, you go off the other direction, soon to be X's. You've got these 6 items. I want you to put your numbers, I want you to allocate points across each of those 6 items. Okay? And you can do it however you like, and you might try and be strategic with this, right? And so you might think about it. How would I allocate these resources of these 100 points across these different assets? And what you understand then, as you start to think about it, is that for every time I try and spite her by putting some points on the things that I think that she would want, I'm going to have to take it away from something that I would actually rather have and take a risk that she's going to be able to get something that I care more about. So what I end up doing is just being fairly straightforward and honest with respect to what I'm looking for. And so each in their separate area, they all assign their points, and then we bring them back together and we look at how the points got allocated between each of them. And they come in and they look something like this. And so now we look down the list and we see that the highest bid anywhere is going to her with the house. She gets the house. Next highest bid looks like it's on the cabin. He's taking the cabin. Next highest, the investments. After that, the midlife crisis Corvette and the boats. And she's left with the final item, the SUV. Ultimately, as you look at this, I mean, think about it. Were you having to sell these assets off in a short space of time, a fire sale kind of environment, you might get 70% of the value of those assets when you sold them off, right? And ultimately, we divide those, say, 50-50. We each get 35 points, 35% of the original value of our assets. Now you add it up. He's taken home 75% of what he really wanted. She's getting 85% of what she really cared about. That what this allows us to do is to recognize that what you care about and what I care about might differ, and that we can make some trade-offs across those issues to create opportunities and value, even as we're trying to make some divisions. So as we look at these things, ultimately what we're trying to do is we're trying to be creative even as we're competing, and that's what makes this not easy. But it's possible even in relationships that have gone south, even when things are very, very difficult, we can do better. And so what we try to do in these courses is to equip people to come in and to be effective in an environment that by definition is not easy. So a couple of takeaways for you here today. A couple of things to be thinking about. First of all, there are not that many real significant decisions that are made independent of other people. That most of the time, we're working with folks where we're either collaborating with them, we're competing with them, we're working together to try and make some decisions going forward. And that they're going to want to influence us, we're going to want to influence them. Negotiation is an environment of mutual influence. And even where things are relatively simple, we're going to be working back and forth to try and optimize our outcomes. Second piece, that negotiation and collaboration really give us tools to help us to create and to claim. That there are two distinct kinds of things that have to happen if you're going to maximize your deal. And so a quality kind of decision here is one that's exhausting our ability to be creative and then pulling the resources in our direction. Finally, if we handle this well, this is a process that will yield you a better outcome. Recognize that your first model, your first solution is very rarely the best solution. That you usually need to tease things apart. You usually have to get some feedback from people to say, you know what, you may better account for this piece, you better make some enhancements over there, and as you do that, you can actually enhance the quality of your deal to push it forward toward a better outcome. So, a couple of quick thoughts for you there. Hope you found that to be an interesting process. Keep in mind, I'm not telling you how to reallocate your resources in order to get a divorce. That's not our goal whatsoever. But to actually take some of these tools and to think about things differently as you encounter competitive situations. So, there we are. Eric, back over to you.
Thank you very much, Gaylen. That was very interesting. Appreciate your time.